Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Cupid's Coach podcast. I'm your host, Julie Ferman, inviting you to transform me to we through the process of doing dating better. And you're going to get to do it better after you get the chance to meet my guest. My guest is Marina Edelman. How you doing, Marina? Say hi first.
Good morning. Hi.
I'm so happy to have her on the program. She's a seasoned therapist, 18 years of experience working with individuals, couples, and family. How I know Marina is because somebody I'm close with in my world knows Marina well and says that she walks on water. And that she's just truly gifted as a therapist. So I want to share her with you. She specializes in using evidence-based approaches, including cognitive behavioral therapy, emotionally focused therapy, and the Gottman method. A lot of you know who Julie and John Gottman are. They're the people behind the 7 principles for making marriage work, the relationship cure, the love prescription. And Marina is a Gottman level 3 trained therapist. So she brings extensive expertise in this renowned approach to couples therapy. Welcome to the program, Marina.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
You know, my first burning question is related to the issues that couples have in relationships. What are they typically when couples come to your office and they are just at their wits' end? What is it usually about? There are probably 2 or 3 topics, I'm guessing, that are commonly brought to you.
So I either get couples who come in and they'll say, we just need a little tune-up. We're just having a little bit of a communication struggle. And that just seems like a can of worms, because when I get in there, I'm like, oh, you have more than just communication problems. There is accepting influence, there's trust, and so on. The other one is almost like an emergency room situation. They've tried everything and they're like, okay, before we file for divorce, this is our last attempt. And so they'll come in to see if they can resolve issues before filing. And the third one is after an affair has happened. Those are the top 3 ways I meet couples.
How often is finances a big issue in relationship troubles?
So finances come up in almost every situation. Some of them are bigger topics, like financial infidelity has happened, or people are in completely different paths. Like one wants to live for the present, another one wants to save and retire early. So in some form or another, it does play a role.
I would imagine. And about communication, who's typically more adept and capable of the type of communication that's needed for relationships to be sustainable? Is it women? Is it men? Is there a difference or not?
So interestingly enough, the Gottmans did a study about who usually stonewalls. So just to back up, the Gottmans method has identified that there's 4 very toxic ways to communicate: stonewalling, defensiveness, contempt, and criticism. So contempt is one of the largest predictors of divorce, but the other 2, defensiveness and stonewalling, and criticism, are bad. What they found is, though, from evolutionary psychology, men have a tendency to stonewall and women have a tendency to criticize. And it goes back to when we were hunters and gatherers. And women would stay back in the field as their men went off to kill a buffalo. So the man had to stop talking and compartmentalize and stonewall, because they're off to kill a water buffalo and they can't just keep talking. Whereas the woman would stay behind with all of her friends and family and keep talking about the problems that they're having. And that, they found, still continues. Women have a tendency to criticize more, men have a tendency to stonewall more.
So tell us, what is the definition of stonewalling? Some people might not know.
Stonewalling, usually the way it appears is the person is intentionally shutting you down, shutting down themselves, not talking. Either they'll go to the other room. If there's an attempt for a conversation, they literally put up a wall that is impenetrable. What usually drives that, though, is this flooded state. The partner doesn't know what to do. They're overwhelmed. And sometimes they're trying to rather say nothing than something really negative. But they're just flooded. They don't know what to do with themselves, so they just shut down.
People who do a lot of stonewalling, are they typically, what attachment style are they? Are they avoidant attachment style? Is that what you would say?
Usually either avoidant or the one that is anxious avoidant. So they kind of toggle back and forth. So sometimes what I see, someone stonewalls, the other person is pursuing them constantly. In emotional focus therapy, they use the terms avoidance, the avoider and the pursuer, or the distancer and the pursuer. So what I sometimes notice is one distances, and as soon as their partner stops pursuing, they're like, wait a second. And then they go into pursuit mode. And so it's two of those attachment styles.
One of the things I encourage people to do as a matchmaker, a dating coach, I watch so much bird's eye perspective on early relationships, especially. I encourage people to stay out of the bedroom for a little while and get to know each other and find out if we really meet each other's key criteria, the most important elements. Because once those hormones start flying with sex and all that, forget it. You know, the great creator wants babies. The great creator wants sex. And even though we could be dating in our 60s and 70s, there's still those hormones flying through. So I recommend people keep their pants on, have
Mhm.
short daytime dates, activity dates, really. And I like to see how people behave in between the dates. You get to see a lot in between the dates. Are they communicative? Are they setting the plan? Are they blowing things off? Are they ghosting? How do they do that? So how can couples find out if they're truly compatible in terms of emotions, psychology, all the types of messes that you see in your office? What are the early tips that you could give us that couples can do to try to determine if they might actually be compatible in relationship?
So listen for cues. That's a great question, but listen for cues such as, I'm not a great texter, or I'm not really good at communicating, or I just need space. Those are usually cues that the person has a little bit of an avoidant personality, and they're like dropping clues to manage the other person's expectations. And those are not necessarily deal breakers, but those are like little signs. And what I'll usually say is like, what does that mean you're not a good texter? Like it doesn't take that much skill to do that. So the things to look for is your cadence or pacing similar to the other person? Is your temperament, not temper necessarily, but temperament in alignment? What happens when you reach out and try to schedule a date and the person doesn't respond to you for a day? Do you become a little anxious? Do you start ruminating on what did I do wrong? Or do they give you enough validation and security that your nervous system is calm? So really pay attention to your nervous system. Our vagal nerve, or our vagus nerve, is the biggest nerve in our body. It's the paranerve, it's part of the paranervous system. And when that is dysregulated, that is telling us something. That person might not be a good match for us, even though they look amazing on paper.
Where is the vagus nerve located in the body?
It's actually all over. It's like the biggest one. It goes from, I can't think of the term right now, but the back of your skull, like all the way down around your heart, arms, legs. It's the biggest one. So it like literally permeates all of it. And
Just
that's when we feel
thinking.
dysregulated.
All right, couples therapy.
Mhm.
Does it work? And what about if one person is just not really too excited about it?
So there was a recent study that came out that said couples enter couples therapy about 6 years too late. And there's an increase in silver divorces in our society currently related to a lot of different issues or different reasons. Therapy really does work. And I'm not just saying this as a couples therapist. I've been in couples therapy myself. I've seen people make remarkable recoveries when they're coming in, and I am just the beacon of hope. They're both hopeless, and I carry hope for them. So it does. It has to be, though, even if one person does not want to come in, what I find is I'll say, just come in by yourself because a family system is like the back of a clock. The smallest gear changes, the rest of the gears have to change. They just don't know how. And I'll sometimes ask the party who's not interested to still complete an online assessment. It gives me a full picture of strengths and weaknesses. And when I start working with one partner and the one that is left behind in a way or out of the office sees changes, they feel encouraged. And using this term that AA uses that I really like, it says attract, don't promote. I really like that. Just be an attractive partner and see what happens. Don't promote there because usually people are like, I don't want to go. It's too scary.
Overall, what would you say are the most important tips for having a successful relationship?
Validate your partner. It is one of the easiest things to do, and people just go into this defensive posturing. Literally, all you have to do is your partner speaks, just paraphrase what you heard them say before you say anything else. Just do that, which makes it so much easier because our brain can't input and output information at the same time. So when we're trying to listen to our partner, but coming up with a defense um, theory, we're overburdening ourselves. So just do that. Just paraphrase and then wait. Also, currently in modern parenting, parents are advised to say to their kids when their kids are coming to them, do you want help, hug, or just to be heard? And I've started using that. And I'm saying to my partners, like, ask that, like just paraphrase and then ask them what they need.
I love that, Marina. It when things get heated in a relationship and the sort of attacks are just going back and forth,
Yeah.
back and forth. It happens with my husband sometimes, and it's not just him. Sometimes I do it too. And I have to say to him, we can't listen and talk at the same time.
Mhm.
I love your suggestion of rather than thinking about what am I going to come back with, instead
Mhm.
allow me to paraphrase what you just said. If I'm hearing you right, what I think you said was, and
Mhm.
let him know that he was heard. Is there a cure for interrupting?
So some cultures, it's considered collaborative overlap. And so it's actually not interrupting. But if there is interrupting, one of the best also tools is just take a pen and paper and just write down what you want to say. And even if that means like, wait, can you hold your thought? Because I have this like urgent need to get something out. Just write it down. You'll come back to it. Nothing is that important.
I love that. So you're in the middle of a heated discussion and
Mhm.
your husband is giving it to you and you
Yeah.
want to say something, but you know you don't want to interrupt. So you just make a little note and then
Yeah.
he knows that you're honoring him, you're respecting him enough to let him finish. I wondered if maybe there should be like a 30-second time clock or something.
There should be, right? Like chess, you just kind of do that. But also, I think what's helpful is if a couple does not discuss an emotionally charged topic for more than 20 minutes. After that, you're just saying things just to create a distance. So that's when like insults start flying or bringing something back. You're just like your mother, or remember 5 years ago when you didn't show up for me. If you stop at 20 minutes, it's actually productive, and then take a time out, come back to it in about 2 hours. The best version of ourselves show up.
I'm happy to hear that. There's a lot of people say, well, never go to bed mad. What do you say about never go to bed mad?
I don't know about that one because like what if you really do just need to sleep? Just how long can you talk about it and not be mad? Just fine. And then like relax your body. And if you can fall asleep, that really shows that you feel pretty safe with your partner. And a lot of people will use that terminology like you don't make me feel safe or I don't feel safe around you. And I'm like, is that true? If you can fall asleep, maybe you do feel safe enough.
That's a good point. I actually don't have a problem with going to bed. I don't want to say mad, but unsettled because
Mhm.
in the morning, that's when I'm strong and clear. When I'm
Mhm.
tired, you don't want to pick an argument with me. You just don't.
Oh.
And so one of the things I have found myself doing with my family members is helping them understand that when things are getting heated, I'm going to be my best self if I can pull away, take a walk, take a nap, whatever I need to do, a bath, something to center myself again, and then come back and have a civil conversation. And sometimes they're aggravated with me when I want to do that. But I know once I start to see my husband's lower lip quiver,
Mhm.
oh, I need out because
Right.
insults are going to start flying, and it's not his best version of himself. And how I respond to it is not usually good either. So, what do you think about that when one of the people says, I need to take a break? Can we finish this later? I need to take a walk. I don't want to say something that I shouldn't say. Is that fair fighting?
Totally. A pure Gottman therapist will suggest for their couples to wear an oximeter or use your smartwatch to let you know when your heart rate is 20 beats above resting, because that means you're in a flooded zone and you are going to start doing things and saying things just to end this conversation. So I'll say, like, if you're noticing your heart rate, like if you're noticing your heart beating, let your partner know. This way, you're training them to really attune to you. And by them creating that space and saying, sure, we can talk about this in an hour whenever you're ready, it built this like deep foundational trust, not just like surface level trust. And that is so beneficial for long-term relationships.
I love it. You know, what we're doing when we can do that is we're protecting the other person from the worst version of ourselves.
It's that inner child whose needs weren't met and there's unfinished business and they're coming for you. Yeah.
I call it the 2%, the 2% of Julie Ferman that really isn't fit for human company. It just isn't. And I'd rather take that version, that 2%, out for a walk with my dog. And sometimes I'll literally just throw rocks. I live in New Mexico, where wide open spaces. And when I'm really frustrated with something, there's something physical like that, I need to do that. Swimming works for me. Hiking up a big, tall hill or a mountain, getting my heart going and breathing. So I'm glad to hear. Thank you for validating what I sometimes will say that aggravates some certain people in my family. I don't want to become that person. And don't we all have a 2%? Don't we all have a shadow side that is just, it's
Yeah.
just ugly. It's fugly. That's how ugly it is.
So we're saying the same thing. You're saying the term 2%, which I love, and I use the term there's like a toddler in us that is throwing a tantrum, and there's like something that is not complete. And so we're going to come out guns blazing because we couldn't maybe in our childhood. Kind of going back to that attachment theory and what needs were not met, and what are we looking for from our partners to fulfill a lot of our needs.
Marina, I'm curious. You've had so many people in your office. I have to believe that there are people that got to their 50s, their 60s, even their 70s without ever having gone back and looked at their childhood wounds. They didn't know to do it. They thought, well, that's just the way things were in my family. I had to buck up and take it. What's your experience of working with people who've never had any therapy at all?
I love it. As a therapist, it's very inspiring to me to be able to shed some light and help them feel empowered due to sense of awareness, that they're able to have these like aha moments and really recognize patterns. Because once they have that awareness, now they can break those multi-generational patterns at times and be better partners. There's a lot of statistics about how divorce rate among second marriages is higher than first, and third is higher than second, because people change their partners but never their patterns. And I try to help them identify their patterns, and not just in romantic relationships, but in general interpersonal dynamics with other people that they might be repeating. And it's really inspiring.
So, yes, I've heard that second marriages fail more than first and third marriages fail more than second, but some of those people are repeat offenders. So I wonder what the stats are if we pull that out. Do you have any idea?
I don't, but there are obviously like some very healthy relationships the second time around where people do learn from their mistakes. It just takes a lot of healthy ego to be able to self-reflect and be like, okay, maybe I'm the problem in this relationship.
Well, let's see. I am the common denominator in all of my horrible
Yeah.
relationships. I fired a client this year because I just gave up. I think we'd done 87 introductions.
Wow, that's a lot. You should have sent that client to me. I would have transformed them.
You know, it's not too late. I never want to give up on anybody.
It's true. I even have couples who come in and they're so well versed on telling me what they don't want that I'll sometimes play a game and I'll say to the other partner, tell me what your wife wants. And they can tell me all the things that their wife doesn't want because that's what the wife has said, or vice versa. I'll ask the wife, tell me what your husband wants. They can't because and I'll even ask the wife, tell me what you want. Like if I have a magic wand, what kind of a marriage would you want? And they'll start with, well, I don't want them to fill in the blank.
And I do the profiling the same way. I don't want anything on a person's dating profile that's in the negative. So instead of, saying nobody who's argumentative and no narcissist, which is hilarious because anybody who is technically a narcissist, and that term is way overused by people who are not therapists, they don't have the qualifications to call somebody that. I will nail them on it every time. Maybe someone has narcissistic tendencies, but I'm not a psychiatrist and I'm not a therapist and I'm not going to label somebody. But instead of saying not a narcissist, what would be the opposite of that when somebody says, I don't want to be with another narcissist? What's the opposite of a narcissist?
Maybe ask for someone who has high emotional intelligence. Maybe ask for someone who knows clean communication styles and can validate, someone who's able to own their part in it and take accountability, which is the opposite of being defensive.
It's funny though, even people whose emotional intelligence is like that of a rock, they still think they have it.
Of course.
It's always
That's
the other person that's messed up. So, I mean, you can't really tell somebody, at least in a dating environment, if I'm having my first call with them or my second call, I don't really have permission to tell them that they're lacking emotional intelligence, and I wouldn't. They're going to go straight to Yelp and write a bad review about me.
true. But you could do kind of a role play scenario, like if this situation comes up, how would you handle it? And then for them to consider, what I'll say is, would you consider alternative options? And I'll talk about neuroplasticity, how we have a tendency to do something one way. And if we can create 5 ways of doing the same thing, by the fifth one, which is the most difficult one, that's when we're stretching ourselves. So I'll just ask them to consider alternative options.
All right, that sounds fair enough. Let's talk about what happens with infidelity.
Sure.
What percentage of people with couple related problems would you say infidelity's been part of it?
I'm going to say one way or another, like sometimes just emotional affairs are still affairs. I'm going to say about 1/3.
Is
1/3.
is it recoverable? How recoverable is it? And what are the keys to recovering if you have had infidelity in the relationship?
It is definitely recoverable. There's some brilliant people like Esther Perel who talks about state of affairs. That's an amazing book. The Gottmans have this approach actually to affair recovery, and it's called atone, attune, attach. And it talks about like a proper atonement, which most people are like, I've apologized. What more do you want from me? How do we move past this? Or when their partner brings up an issue, they're just so like, oh, just defeated and they have no energy to atone. So proper atonement, which has multiple components to it, but one of them is really digging deep and to understand why were they able to risk their relationship. because we don't go to gamble and gamble our house away or our firstborn. We don't do that. So why were you okay with gambling away your relationship? That's kind of like a summary of atonement. And then the attunement is you're noticing you're driving down 101, 405, I'm in Southern California, past a hotel, and really recognizing like your partner knows that you met your affair partner at this hotel. Check in with them in advance. Like, we just drove by this hotel. How are you feeling? That's like attuning to your partner's needs. And it's so difficult to bring up a topic that could derail the evening, but your partner is worth it. And then learning how to attach to each other and really create marriage 2.0 and really connecting and creating what I call an airtight relationship.
Beautiful. Um, let's talk about communication. It's it's interesting in the boot camp that I created. The third week of the fourth week is on communication. Both times I've recorded my boot camp, it's been really hard for me, and somehow I pull it together. But I'm in class with everyone, right? I don't have a perfect relationship. Mr. Ferman doesn't have a perfect relationship with
No
me.
one does.
We're in the thick of it. Um,
Yeah.
and 34 years into this relationship, it's still so challenging sometimes. What can you tell us about communication, especially related to like, how can we figure out early on if this person that we're dating has a communication style that might work for us or not?
So consider bringing up your feelings without accusation. So it's the proverbial common, I feel this when. And the when has to not be accusatory, but it has to be factual. I feel slighted when you get a glass of water for yourself and don't offer me one. And wait for your partner to paraphrase, like, I get it. It makes sense why, when I get up to get a glass of water, you feel slighted. And then what happens after that? Are we going to start like sending messages about, well, this is what you do to me, so I understand. But the healthier way to be after the paraphrasing happens is, now what do we do? And come up with a solution. The Gottman say that there is 69% of our problems are perpetual problems. They're the same problems. And we need to figure out how to resolve them. So when you're dating, do you feel comfortable just check in with yourself, bringing up an issue that is problematic to you? And how does your partner respond to it? Are they collaborating? Let's come up with a solution. If I forget to get you the glass of water, please remind me because I really want to get you that glass of water. Or are they like, why can't you get yourself a glass of water? Why do you need to rely on me? I want someone who's independent. So those are like little things that you should start checking in by sharing I statements.
I like that you mentioned the word independent. It's something that I'm sensitive to when I see a woman put on her profile. I'm very independent. Uh,
Mm.
it's not it's not something that men like to see. Um, and I think because men are instinctively providers, protectors, they want to be able to. I love how men try to make us happy.
Yes.
I think that is the cutest thing in the whole world. They try to make us happy and they will use those words. And I know women who just cannot be made happy. You probably do too. And I just posted Instagram this week and got a lot of funny comments because I have a picture of me cracking up. And I said, women come to me all the time. I want a man who makes me laugh. Well,
Mhm.
he's in charge of whether we're laughing or not, right?
Mhm.
So, what do you have to say about that stuff, Marina?
I think it is such a fine line between codependence and independence. And I I do feel like we are in charge of our own happiness, how we react, how we respond. Can we give a partner a benefit of the doubt? I think independence is this thing like, of course, we want to be able to be okay, However, I think in interdependence is a really good term that I like. So interdependence is I depend on you, you depend on me. I want to show up for you. I expect you to show up for me. And then we do life together. But saying like, you should be fine. Like, why can't you get your own water? Why can't you do all these things? Of course we can. But sometimes, there are five love languages, and sometimes our love language is acts of service. And that's okay. We also can't really regulate our own nervous system. We really do need hugs from people to feel calm and just to feel like we're not alone. We're not built to be alone.
Yeah, we're not built to be alone. We are social creatures, and yet more than half of us are living alone now.
Loneliness is such an epidemic, especially actually with men. There are a lot of really lonely men who struggle with making true platonic male friendships. When I'll meet with sometimes with men post divorce specifically, they're like, how do I have guy friends? And it's a challenge. And Ezra Klein actually did a really great podcast about 3 months ago about loneliness and about men and how do you develop and cultivate friendships.
I really like men's groups and I recommend it. And a bunch of the people who've done my boot camps are already in men's groups. Well, no surprise, a growth oriented person is likely to say yes to the next growth opportunity. Um,
Definitely.
I was on a call this morning with this amazing hunky dude, and he's one of the few, I think like less than 5% of men and women are what I call unicorns. They're the people who look like the it guy on the outside. She looks like the it guy on the outside, but when you go in deep, whoa,
Mhm.
they have huge amounts of personal confidence and capacity for emotional intelligence, all of that. And unicorns are not easy to match
It's true.
because the more we have to offer, the more selective we're going to be. The more selective we are, the more challenging it is because those few people that are of interest, well, everybody wants to meet that person, right?
Yes.
So unicorns are hard to match. And I love to match a unicorn with another unicorn. They recognize each other very quickly. And
Yes.
a lot of women tell me they want to be with that kind of guy. And I'm like, careful what you ask for, darling. He's going to call you on your shit every time.
Yes. I don't know if your definition of unicorn is the same as mine, but one of my components when I do spot people like that is self-regulation. Because you can appear brilliant and funny and attractive and put together and responds to texts and pays bills and all of that. But self-regulation, when our nerves are kind of when somebody steps on our toes, and to still be able to stay in this, to calm our vagus nerve and to stay in this collected space, to be able to process information, to articulate our thoughts and feelings, that to me is a unicorn.
I love that. Now I'm going to really challenge myself to be self-regulating. What do you have to say about the word trigger? The word trigger is a trigger for people. Tell us about
It
the word trigger.
is. Oh my gosh, it's so overused. I think it's important. It's important to do an aftermath of a fight, to really talk about a fight, to make sure that it doesn't continue, to figure out like what was it about what happened that like pushed you into that stage or into that fight or flight mode. But I like to use other words like what activated you? What was the child? What was the wound? What was what was it that like you lost your sense of self and all composure demeanor just went out the window? So I know trigger is like such a overly used word, kind of like narcissist or you're bipolar, like all of these terminologies thrown around. But what activated us is actually an important self-awareness tool and part of self-regulation. We need to know, like, if someone is using certain words or verbiage, specifically the word why like gets so many people, because when we're little and our parents are like ask us why did you do da da da, we are brought back to being this like child and we're like, I don't know, what did we do wrong and we made a mistake and we don't want to be called out.
So the word why
Yes,
puts us on the defensive.
almost immediately. It's very, the unicorns are the ones that can hear why and translate it to like, oh, they're just being curious. They just really want to know how I got to where I got to. Non-unicorns hear why and they're like, because, and now we're off to the races.
I get it. So if somebody, let's just say I'm with Mr. Ferman and he has a shit fit about something, who knows?
Mhm.
Um, Instead of saying, why did you get so upset? How would I say it?
Help me understand what happened. What was it that about the situation that really emotionally affected you? What is it about my demeanor, tone? Like, tell me how you got to where you got to. Even just like it sounds awkward in our English language, but just replace why with how. It might be a weird structure, but it will be better.
Man, you're good at this stuff. No wonder. No wonder my friend said that you walk on water. What's the
Thank you.
first step for a couple? Is it scheduling with you? Is there a book to read? What's the first step?
The first step I would suggest, if they're wondering if therapy is for them or not, I'll say, like, it can't hurt. So why not reach out? I love working with couples before they get married. And we kind of, I have like a program that I do because couples are married in 5 different ways. And I kind of go through each one of those pillars and I like test it. Is this a secure pillar? Or do we need to do some reinforcement work? So the best way is really to, you go to my website, there's an online scheduling link, and just schedule an appointment. And let's see where we go from there.
Is it a good idea for if a couple is working with you remotely to be sitting in front of the screen together? Or maybe he's over there in his room and I'm over here in my room and we're working with you that way. What's the best way? Because, they could slug each other if they're sitting too close.
So if they're in the same facility, sometimes it's a house, sometimes it's an office, I do ask them to be in the same room because I'll ask them to turn to each other. They, of course, can look at me, but now I'm triangulating myself. I would love for them to look at each other and really to speak to each other. And I'll direct them. Sometimes I'll do some psychoeducation, so they'll look at me, but a lot of times I'll say, look at each other and tell each other that. And I'll pay attention. Can they stay connected? Can they maintain eye contact? I also have bi-coastal couples. And so those couples, I will say, like, each one be on your own screen. Make sure there's good lighting, make sure there's, good reception, batteries are charged, and so on.
Let me ask you, as the one who has couples coming to you all the time, what's typically the issue with sex? One person wants it more than the other, or one person wants it more creatively than the other?
So, yes, but also initiation. I feel like this is 2024, and I hope women now are feeling confident in themselves to be able to initiate because men also want to be pursued. I know we're talking about a very cisgendered, heterosexual, traditional couples in this podcast. And just for continuity, I think it's important to stay, but I do feel like women at this point need to be comfortable with seducing their partners and not. Women have a tendency to be very self-critical of their bodies. And I'll say to them, like, if you and I are friends and I have you come over for lunch and I'll say, like, ugh, this soup is disgusting. Do you want to try it? You'll probably say, no, thank you. And what I notice is women will do that. They'll criticize their bodies and then they want their partners to desire their bodies. And I'm like, do you want to revisit that a little bit? So I feel like, yes, sometimes sex drive is different. I feel like sometimes creativity is different. Sometimes people have kinks that they're uncomfortable talking about. But also, it's this like criticism of ourselves and sometimes of our partner. And then you want them to be attracted to you. That is one of the most difficult things, actually, as a couples therapist, is for me to revive passion. I can pretty much, if anybody comes in with any issue, I can pretty much have a treatment plan in mind. When people are lacking attraction, it is, oh my gosh, that is so difficult. Like I try to throw Hail Marys left and right, but that's hard. So I'll say like continue being the attractive person your partner fell in love with. I'm not saying you have to always shave your legs and trim your ear hair and all of that. Like we obviously age and we get wrinkles and we become bald and all these things happen, but like put effort in. It's difficult to get that back once it's gone.
Well, it's clear from the reading and studying that I've done that the number one most appealing quality in a woman is confidence. It's
Mhm.
our job as women to have confidence in who we are physically and to love ourselves first and to love our bodies and take care of our bodies. And when we do that, we feel more vibrant, we feel more sexy. And I appreciate what you're saying about initiation.
Mhm.
So again, we're talking about communication and making adaptations around each other's strengths and weaknesses.
Actually, one of the books I'm working on is going to be called, the working title is Men, Marriage, and Menopause, because I find that that is even more difficult. And um, 1/3 of women, pre-menopause, post-menopause, in menopause, whatever, 20-something-year-old, 30-something-year-old, really do not feel aroused until they're in the act, which is kind of also hard to be initiating something. It's like sitting down, making an amazing meal and eating it when you have no appetite. But once they are in the act, that arousal factor is turned on. So I actually put the onus on understanding and attuning to your partner. As a man, are you married to someone who really does need to hear from the morning till the evening that they're attracted and they're beautiful and show gratitude and all of the five languages, and to understand that your partner might not be interested but they're open to it, and then they will get into the mood. And as women, do we need to understand like we might not be interested? So start off with like a sensual hug or a massage just to connect so it doesn't have to lead to actual penetration and intercourse. That's like the attunement piece that I feel like is missing, and people are like, well, I don't want to be rejected, and why should I do something I'm not interested in doing? And I'm like, how many of us are interested in flossing our teeth? We just do it, and it's okay.
But
It
I'm
is.
really pleased to hear what you have to say about this, Marina, that I'm not the only woman that doesn't just walk around horny. It takes me till I'm in the act to actually be excited about it. Otherwise, I'd rather be writing a blog article or something.
Actually, it's interesting when I work with couples and they date, or an individual who's starting to date. Some people are naturally very flirtatious, just naturally. They flirt with anyone and everyone. They don't mean anything. And then other people just are so, I don't know, afraid of flirting, even just like benign flirting. That is something that gets lost. And I'll suggest to couples, like when you're starting to date, pay attention. Is their idea of flirting your idea of flirting? Because they're giving you cues and clues on who they really are. And then when you're in a relationship 6 months into it, for example, do you feel like you are still dating, still flirting? And if you're like, yeah, we've been together, we don't need to flirt. I'm like, no, no. You need to flirt. You need to flirt in your 80s and in your 90s. We're sexual beings until we're dead.
I love that. And my colleague Susan Rabin wrote a ton of books on flirting, and she says that flirting is one of three things. It's making a comment, it's asking a question, or offering a compliment.
Mhm.
None of those three things are hard to do. And
Oh.
so it's a practice. And so I encourage people, find the language of flirting that you're most comfortable with. And if it's compliments, start showering people out there in the world with compliments. You get good at it, and then you've got that superpower when you need it. But do we still do it 34 years into a marriage? Do we still flirt with each other? I'll be flirting with Mr. Ferman better for the rest of the day because we had this conversation.
So I've been with my husband 30 years. We just celebrated our 28th wedding anniversary. And I have to say, he does actually a better job flirting with me than I flirt with him. And he does it on a daily basis. And it's not creepy. It's just like a flirt, whether it's sexual innuendo or it's like googly eyes or a look or something, or like a hug that lasts for more than 8 seconds. And I really appreciate that he does that.
That's pretty amazing. And he knows that it's good for the relationship. So he's doing it strategically to keep you close to him.
I hope that's what it is.
He's doing it on purpose. He's not just,
Yeah, you're right. Yes, he is. And he's also attuned to me. And he's maybe that's like when, so the other thing that I notice in couples, and even when they're dating, they do this from the very beginning. They try to make sure everything is equal. And I'm like, what does that even look like? Like you're always on a seesaw and you're like, to keep that balance exactly like is so difficult and for it to look the same. So he knows that maybe for me, flirting doesn't come as readily. So he'll do that. And then I know that acts of service, that's my love language. And I know, like, for him, like, he can just go and get a glass of water without thinking about it, but I give him the benefit of the doubt. And so if I want the water, I'll say, like, could you grab me a water? I see you're getting up, without being upset at him. It's like filling those like voids and helping each other.
just beautiful. I love that you have a great relationship after so many years. How did you meet initially?
So initially we met when I was 17 and he was 20 and somebody introduced us. And then we dated for 2 months. He broke up with me. He said I was immature. We both went off and got engaged to other people. Independently, we ended those engagements, and the same person, it was his cousin and cousin's wife, who introduced us the first time. They had a baby and they invited us to come to meet the baby, and we were both there. And from that point on, we were together.
Amazing. So of course they came to your wedding.
Yes, of course.
Just beautiful. I really appreciate the work that you do, and this podcast will live on in my library of wonderful resources for people to have. And I so encourage people to do this work of discovering who are we in relationship, and practicing the art of keeping love alive. Thank you for everything you do, Marina.
Thank you, Julie.
So folks, I hope you found this to be useful and helpful. You can find Marina. What's the best way for people to find you online?
MarinaEdelman.com is the best way. And I have an Instagram handle. It's marina.on.marriage.
Marina.on.marriage. Ooh,
Mhm.
I'm going to have to get that. All right, very good. I'm so glad you were on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Julie, for everything you do.
You betcha. So folks, this is your mission. Go out there and transform me to we for yourself. Thanks for listening.